Hi, this is Misha. This video, we're going to shoot and talk about Russian 12-gauge shotguns based around the Kalashnikov long-stroke gas piston system, two-lug rotating bolt, trigger group, so on and so forth. In my hands is a Saiga-12. This is the SGL-1294. This is the American export version of the Saiga-12KS, which is the shorter barrel with folding stock. And here we have the Molot VEPR-12 folder, again with the shorter barrel. Of course, both of these have 18.5-inch barrels to comply with the American laws and so on and so forth, but they're quite close to the Russian counterparts, and these are made in several versions. Back to the Saiga, since this is kind of where it all began. When communism fell in the 90s, early 90s, 91, 92 in Russia, the previously state-owned factory of Izhmash became nominally privatized and was renamed Izhmash, and started to work on a line of rifles and shotguns for hunting use, and they would expand later, but they would give these the name of Saiga, which is an antelope type creature, and they were originally made for hunting, but soon law enforcement and eventually the military would get interested. They would start to design these around 94, 95, and the Saiga 12-gauge shotgun version was in production by around 1997. Now this is obviously a tactical version. They had a hunting version, which is very similar in the front end here, but instead of having the folding stock and pistol grip, it had a traditional hunting stock with the trigger group moved to the rear. There are so many versions of both of these guns, no way can I cover them in this video. For example, these Saigas, the most common barrel lengths in Russia, standard barrel would be about 23 inches for the Saiga-12, and the Saiga-12K would have a short 17-inch barrel. Now for import, this has to be extended in America out to 18.5, of course. Magazines, this is a standard 8-round, which is mostly used for more tactical things. This is the hunting 5-round, most common in Russia, although 2 rounds have been made or modified to work. Anyway, after these were made for the civilian market initially, police began to get interested, and they would start to purchase the 12KS amongst other versions. I've also seen 12S with the long barrel and folding stock, 12KS being the short barrel and folding stock. And then the military started to become interested around the turn of the millennium, around 99, 2000, 2001. And they put out some requirements, some things they want. And so both Izhmash and Molot would start to work on improving a 12-gauge based on the AK. Now this Molot VEPR-12, Wikipedia says that the initial design started off at Izhmash, which is, there are some major similarities between these two guns, so it seems like the design maybe started with the Saiga, but it was quickly carried over to Molot, who really took it and upgraded it. And they would release the VEPR-12 around 2003. Now, whereas the Saiga was designed as a hunting gun first and then became a military and law enforcement gun, the VEPR-12 was really designed from the outset for police, military use, tactical shooting, competition shooting type use. So it still had civilian applications, but it wasn't really designed as a hunting weapon. Although you can obviously hunt with this, it's still a 12 gauge, but that wasn't what it was really designed for. Now this, because Molot produces RPKs, is really based on a pretty standard RPK receiver, and it has many RPK features we'll get to in just a minute. The Saiga-12, likewise, is based on Izhmash's AK-100 series line, including the AK-74, so it's going to have more AK features. For example, this is a heavier duty receiver, wider here for the wider barrel, but it is still a little thinner all around, a little bit lighter gun, and it's still based on a more of a modified AK-74, AK-100 type receiver. The handguard is kind of unique to the Saiga series. However, the pistol grip and this buttstock are pretty much straight off the AK-100 series. Now, it's not surprising that both companies would kind of go with what they already knew. And keep in mind, the Saiga came first, so it's not quite as refined. I'm trying to think where to start talking about things, kind of comparing and contrasting. Well, let's talk about weight first off. This is about a 7.5 to 7 3/4 pound gun. Not light, but for a 12 gauge shotgun, it actually is quite svelte and handy. It balances quite well. It balances kind of right here at this point. The VEPR, on the other hand, thanks to its RPK heritage, is about an 8.5 to 9 pound weapon. Again, several variations exist. Oh, and I mentioned on this one the standard barrel length is 17 to 23. On this one, standard barrel length is about 16.8 up to about 20.5 inches standard. But they do make 26 and even longer barrel versions for competition shooting and for export to places like Britain. So this one, generally the longer version has a shorter barrel. The two short barrel versions are basically the same. So let's flip these over and kind of just get to comparing them. Jump right in. The VEPR-12 was designed more or less to suit the needs of what the Russian military thought it wanted, and the police, whereas the Saiga-12 has been modified over the years. Now this is a pretty traditional earlier Saiga version. Later Saigas, such as the 12-404, will have more of the modern features like the VEPR, but this is the really traditional Saiga. Starting at the muzzle, we have the same thread pitch on both guns. Now both of these are wearing Molot factory flash hiders, but the only difference between the Molot and the Izhmash flash hider is that the Izhmash does not have the wrench flats. At least the older Izhmashes I used to have. Maybe the newer ones they've added them. They are chrome lined, birdcage style, pretty short and effective. The barrels on both of these are hammer forged, chrome lined. The Saiga has a 2-position manually adjustable gas system. And we have a bead front sight here, exposed AK style gas tube here, and a notch rear sight here. This wind is adjustable. There are a plethora of sight variations for the Saiga-12. There's even a version with a sight tower out here. Now what's interesting about it, that sight tower is actually screwed on to the barrel muzzle threads, and then has a second set of threads to screw a flash hider onto it. And you also see some with the more traditional AK-100 series rear sight. Again, I'm just showing the one I have. So the VEPR-12, on the other hand, has a combination gas and sight block with a very traditional post-adjustable front sight. This is often called a self-regulating gas block. There's really no internal mechanism to self-regulate. It just holds pressure until the bolt moves back and then gas can escape back here. These both use a puck in here to tap the gas piston. but it is a non-adjustable gas block. That's the point I'm making. It has a very similar type of upper gas tube here, but this has a handguard on it. This is RPK style. It has a typical RPK 200 series rear sight with windage adjustment. The part's just straight off. Looking at the receivers, this one has a slightly thinner receiver with a traditional smooth AK 100 series top cover that's removable. We have the side rail for an optic mounted to the side. The VEPR, as I said, has a RPK receiver. Again, both of these are beefed up receivers from standard, but the RPK is still a little heavier with the heavier front trunnion fixture. We have a top cover with a polymer Picatinny rail connected to it, and it is hinged as on an AKS 74U, a crank. Hinges up. And that's to give the rail a mounting fixture in the front so it holds zero, because there is no side rail. Instead, we have a left side safety selector here, and that's companionated on the right side by an extended, it's a very traditional AK style selector, but has this extended shelf back here for the thumb. Whereas this Saiga-12 just has the traditional AK safety. Now these both have this piece right here. This acts as a movable part to the dust cover to allow for an ejection port wide enough for the 12, but when the bolt's forward, it still provides some protection against debris getting in the action, especially with your safety up. You're pretty well sealed up then. The biggest difference would be in the magazine system. This uses very typical rock and lock mags, like AKs. There is no automatic bolt hold open. Some have a manual hold open here. This one has the hole for it. I took it out because it was digging into my finger because it hangs down when shooting. I can put it back in if I need to. The VEPR, on the other hand, does have a last round hole open. This flange pops down when it's open. Let's it go forward. This has a mag well, and the mags are pretty much drop free. They go straight in. It even has a manual hold open here if you need to lock it back without a mag in it. In addition to just being a little better and having the bolt hold open, this mag well system makes loading a full mag in much easier. On the Saiga-12, you do have to kind of fight with it, especially on a full 8-round mag, because it is the rock and lock style, and they fit a little tight. These are still pretty new mags, so. Now, as I said before, there are newer versions like the 404 that have copied the magwell system, but their bolt hold opens still don't seem to work as well as the Molot. Moving down, the trigger guard and mag catch are very similar, if not almost identical. Even though the Molot has this magwell, it still has a very traditional AK mag release, which is at least ambidextrous, which is good. These typically come with this oversized ergonomic pistol grip, finger grooves. The Saiga-12s can either have the more traditional pistol grip as this one, or they can have a larger grip like the Molot, although the Izhmash version does not have the finger grooves in the front. It's just smooth, and this has a smoother texture to it. The Izhmash grip has a rougher texture, more like the rest of this furniture. Moving back, folding stocks. As I said, this one pretty much uses an AK-74M style, except it does have this rubber butt plate. There's just a button on the side to press here. If I can get it. There we go. It folds over. It cannot store a cleaning kit because of the rubber butt plate. To release it, there's a button here, rubber button. You just press and it just unlocks. Has the cutout, of course, for the scope rail, and it has the cutout on the bottom for attaching something. It's just basically the standard AK-74M. The VEPR's stock uses the same folding hinge mechanism as their RPK-S and RPK-74M. The lever is on the same side and basic same location as on the Saiga, but you press it forward and then you can fold the stock over. This cheek piece flips to get out of the way. Let me push it back here. And then it locks here. Whereas this stock is made out of reinforced polymer, this one is mostly tubular steel with polymer butt plate, but has rubber on the end, and this movable cheek piece. Now the release on this is actually in the back here. Again, very RPK style. Like that. This one has a very stiff stock, which is generally a good thing, especially for 12 gauge. So your butt plate flips up. And that's pretty much the walkthrough of the two guns. Internally, the bolt groups themselves are extremely similar, as are the trigger groups. The biggest internal differences have to do with the mag well here and with the gas block up here. Oops, wrong side. Some Saiga and VEPR parts interchange, some do not. And again, there are several variations, especially of the Saiga-12. I've been looking for solid examples of Russian military use of either of these. A lot of websites report that they use the Saiga-12KS, but that's about it. I'd assume it's a special forces type thing where they get what they want. Generally speaking, the VEPR would be probably better for military use because it was designed for it. However, pros and cons comparing the two. Lengthwise, these two models are the same. They both have folding stocks as well. They both have 8-round mags as standard. They both use the internal Kalashnikov system. The Saiga is a little bit lighter weight. The VEPR probably a little more durable. The gas system's kind of a flip of the coin. Some people like the automatic version used by the VEPR. Some people like the manually adjustable system used by the Saiga-12, especially if they're trying to shoot lower power cartridges. Both of these are rated for 12 gauge, 2 3/4 standard, and 3-inch Magnum shells. Although sometimes they will have trouble cycling lighter loads. And it really depends on the individual gun. Again, both have chrome line bores. But generally, most would say the VEPR-12 is a better shotgun. Molot tends to have a little better fit and finish. But then again, for a long time, Saigas were less expensive. The Saiga started to come into America sometime a little after 2000. It was first imported by EAA And then after about 2006, it started to be imported by RAA. And the last guns were imported by Arsenal and FIME. So guns like this, they were the ones to bring in the SGL. The first guns all came in with the hunting stock. In 2011, there was a big thing involving the ATF where people were afraid the Saiga-12 was going to be banned. It was basically up for review. And people were afraid the ATF was going to declare it non-sporting and therefore no longer importable. So there was a little bit of a panic buy on existing Saiga-12 hunters. And people had been converting them by pulling the hunting stock off, putting a trigger forward on it, and so on and so forth. Instead of banning these, the ATF declared them not only sporting, they even said importing them with a pistol grip and fixed buttstock would be sporting, because enough people said, hey, we use these for competition shooting and match shooting, and so they were allowed to start coming in. About 2012, you started to see factory pistol grip Saiga-12s coming in. And since that was approved, you started to see VEPRs coming in with pistol grips. Now the first VEPRs would come in with the standard rear trunnion and a wood or polymer buttstock fixed. And then the next batch, with this, which this one was a part of, would come in with this side folding tubular steel stock. Finally, the folding versions are still coming in, or were up until the sanctions, I should say. They're still on the market today. They also have a fixed stock version that looks identical. It just doesn't have any of the folding mechanism inside. It's just a smooth, doesn't have the latch here. Now when these came in, the folding stock was tack welded open. But many, including mine here, by the time I got it, the tack weld was already basically cracked and barely hanging on. It did the job. Now most of your Saiga-12s that came in with pistol grips just had a standard rear trunnion and had a standard buttstock on them. But a few, this SGL 1294 included, came in with the folding stock. Now the only catch there, they had a internal block where the stock could only fold with the safety on. When the safety was down, it cammed a piece of metal into the stock. I'll open it here again so you can see it. If you see this slot in the bottom of the stock, that piece of metal would go into that slot and keep it from folding. This wasn't something done for the US market. This is actually something done over in Russia. Folding stocks are legal over there, but if the barrel is under a certain length, I believe it's under 20 inches in our measurements, you can't have it be able to be fired with it folded. So civilians over there with a license for a smoothbore can have the 12S, which has the 23-inch barrel and a working folding stock, or they can have the 12KS with the 17-inch barrel and folding stock. But if they do that, the safety has to be on before the stock can fold, therefore rendering the gun inert. So you can have a folding stock on a shorter barrel gun, but only if the gun doesn't work. Of course, once in the US, this doesn't matter to our laws one hoot, so I pulled the block out of this one immediately because it was stupid. When these are sold, they usually are sold with the 8-round mags you see in them here. Excuse me, I spoke completely reverse. They're usually sold with the 5-round mags. Yep, you see here. But the 8 rounds have been sold separately almost since the beginning. And guns like this Saiga-12 94 did come with an 8-round mag. So factory 8 and even 10 rounds for the VEPR-12 have been imported by various people. Now both of these guns are no longer importable because of sanctions against Russia. The Saiga-12 went away in 2014, and the VEPR-12 went away in 2017. But these were imported in quite large numbers, and whereas the rifle VEPRs and Saigas have really shot up in price since the sanctions, the shotguns are still available out there at near pre-sanction prices. So they're still available. I thought we would just do a video comparing these, shooting them, talking about them. They're both interesting guns. I, generally speaking, prefer the VEPR, but the Saiga, it has a good feel to it. It is lighter, and it has a very traditional AK buttstock. I don't know, I would say it has more of a traditional AK look. It's a less, at least this version is kind of a less tactical gun. This one also has a really nice trigger. I don't know why. It's just really nice. The Molot trigger is a military trigger. It's not bad, but it's not great. Just a trigger. I will say the safeties on the Molots are very stiff. Makes it hard to use the shelf, and it's just kind of sharp steel. I've often thought I want to rubber coat both sides because it's just, I wish they'd kind of serrated it and put a little coating on it, make it a little nicer. I mean, they already used rubber on the cheek piece and butt plates. They had rubber. Kind of wish they'd do that. It is a heavier gun though, as I said. Generally the VEPRs have always sold for more, but then again they've almost always come in with more features than the Saiga-12s. Most Saigas imported were the hunting versions, although there are the SGL-12s, a few different versions with more military furniture. And once you get up to that, they're about the same price point, really. The Saiga-12 94s cost a little more than the VEPR side folders. And also the Saiga mags, the factory mags, are quite, well, before the sanctions, these mags were about $100, and the Molot factory mags were about $60. So the Molot mags were always a little bit cheaper before the sanction, that is. Now it seems like after the sanctions, the Molot mags are going up more than the Saigas, and I think it's just because of there's a lot of these Molots out there, and people need mags for them. Nope.
Nope.
To be fair, I'm going to try the other mag. To be fair, the Saiga and the Saiga mags are brand new.
Yeah.
The VEPR is not. Let's give it another go. But decidedly it needs to be on 2, no question about that. Okay.
Lower. Go ahead. Better that time.
Yeah, that was a full mag at the stovepipe from the last one. So it could just be a break-in thing. I'm gonna reload and then see where we come.
Okay. Good. Almost.
Let's see how many we got left or something.
No, that's it.
I've had that little stovepipe on every Saiga I've had.
Yeah.
I think because you don't have the pressure from the magazine with the next round popping it out.
Yeah.
So I even get that on the VEPR occasionally.
Right. Alright.
Alrighty, I'll put 5 more to this. Chambers.
A little right. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, 5 shots. Just has that stovepipe on the last round again. And then I'm going to make it worse by flipping it around completely. There we go. Heavy mags.
Good there.
Alrighty. Hi, me again. Just an update. The first part we recorded a couple of weeks back, and we went out and shot. We thought we would just do a little update here of how these two worked out. Put a few rounds through each. The Saiga, at the first couple of shots, was having some minor stovepiping, but keep in mind this was an unfired gun before today. So after it had a few rounds through it, it seemed to smooth out. It was still having that last round wasn't quite kicking out, which is a common issue I've experienced with light loads in all these AK and AR type shotguns. But at the end there, the last several mags we put through it, that was the only malfunction. So it was smoothing out quite nicely after having a few rounds through it. As for the VEPR, this one I've had for a number of years, and it's had a relatively high round count. And it had no surprises. It continues to function just fine with pretty much anything. Comparing how these shoot, the straight-in magwell in the last round held open is very pleasant for the Molot. The Saiga, you really have to use the manual hold open to get a full magazine to fit in, because with the bolt closed you can't, because it has to rock in, and obviously you don't get a last automatic last round, although its manual hold open isn't too bad. It is lighter, and surprisingly the recoil is a little bit lighter feeling to me on this than on the VEPR. I do also like the nice kind of spongy butt plate, and the ergonomics of the handguard and the stock is quite nice. So when this works, which it was doing quite well at the end, I kind of like how it shoots better. You would think being a lighter gun than the Molot, it would have more felt recoil, but I think the Molot puts a little more gas into its system, so you feel its recoil a bit more. Plus the Molot has a more squared off foregrip and a tubular stock. If you use the cheek rest, you're above the sight, so you need to fold it away, so then your cheek is right against a polymer metal stock, and its butt plate is a little firmer. So on the other hand though, last round hold open, so I would say feature wise I like this gun, and it's definitely a little heavier, a little more beefy, and it seems to be more reliable, more ammo forgiving. But just for the ergonomics and being kind of lightweight and handy, I do like this SGL-12 94. Plus the trigger in it has a really nice trigger. Really nice, honestly. I probably just got lucky, but this one has a really good trigger. I like it. And the folding stock is just a classic. Well, if you have any questions or comments, we welcome them below. If you'd like to post pictures and talk about your own VEPR-12 or Saiga-12, that'd be great. If you like the video, please click like. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd really appreciate it if you could do that at some time. As always, this is Misha, and we'll catch you very soon, hopefully, in the next video. I'll see you then.